Hi guys, so I'm going to quickly go over some skin tone mixing techniques that I made a couple videos from last semester, but I just kind of want to do it over. So there'll be a few different videos you can choose from. Hopefully they'll all be helpful in some way. So I'm going to first share my screen and just show you a couple artists who painted figurative and the different ways they approached it. So Alice Neal, you can see the artist who I asked you to go see at the Met. She does a variety of color choices to create her her skin tones for her folks that she paints. So there's different approaches that you can see. I really want you guys to get used to seeing color, not seeing black and white. When you're out in the streets, when you're looking at a white coffee cup, thinking about the shadows, not in terms of black and white, but thinking of the shadows in terms of warm and cool. And how she's using green here, the green of the shirt reflecting onto the face, but it's also the color of the shadow. Lots of pinks and oranges and yellows, with this electric blue outline. So that's one way an artist approaches. Kerry James Marshall, I consider one of the best painters alive, is known for his dark skin tones and kind of what that evokes to people in his choices in that. I think I showed you guys, you folks watched a video on that, and we're going to talk more about him, but kind of his choices around blackness and skin tone. And there's a couple other artists who I think do a beautiful job. Lynette Yiadom Boaki, I apologize if I'm saying that name incorrectly. The way she paints skin is also really interesting. You can see a range of shades of brown here, but making that with the yellows and oranges. And so when I teach younger students how to mix skin color, I really focus on the base. The base is brown. I always start with brown because that is really where we're coming from. And then we're going to adapt, adding yellows, pinks, greens, purples, blues, to kind of shift the value and the warm and coolness of a skin color. So this is Chris O'Feely's watercolors. Also beautiful way of doing skin as well. One thing we need to think about is your undertones. So if anybody here is interested in makeup, when you go to buy makeup to conceal certain blemishes or discolorations or bags under your eyes, there's different colors you can get. You can get green, orange, blues, and that's to counteract the color in your it's kind of like the complementary color. So I have a lot of pinks, like a lot of undertones of pinks, right? So when I go to buy concealer, I get green tinted makeup because the complements of red is green, and that's going to even out into a neutral color. And so what I'm going to demo now is just kind of how to start mixing your color. So here's my table. As you can see, just for the demonstration purposes, I'm showing you 3 different reds: a quinacridine rose, a magenta, and a cadmium red, which is, I think this is the one you have. Again, cadmium yellow medium, cadmium yellow light, some white, and I'm just using the one primary blue right now. And again, this is going to change based on the brands of paint you have. And if you mix brands of paint, say you have some Blick student grade, say you have some Blick studio grade, say you have some Winsor Newton or Williamsburg, or whatever brands. When you mix brands, things are going to mix different too. I'm not saying you shouldn't mix brands. I'm just saying that's one thing to consider as well. I totally mix brands of paint. These are 3 different brands of paint down here. So wiping my brush off. I don't have a sponge right now. I'm in my studio and I'm still unpacking, so I'm just wiping it on a piece of canvas. I'm going to use the medium yellow. And remember, blues, blacks, purples, and reds are overpowering. So you always want to remember that. I'm going to start with this cadmium red, since this is the one you guys have. So you see me just kind of spatulating, or like a spatula, like just scraping up the paint, spreading it back out, trying to get all the colors evenly mixed through there. So this is a really nice, rich brown. Now I can see what happens if I add a little bit more yellow. Now what happens if I add a little bit lemon yellow? My prediction was it would be a little greener. I'm kind of right. It turned it a little bit greener. I'm going to add a little bit more red and yellow. That's redder. I'm going with some blue. And then it's kind of going back to that original deep brown that I had, almost like bordering on purple. Now, a couple things you can do. You can take a lot of yellow and then just use the leftover brown on your knife. And so you want to do this before you start making portraits. You want to experiment with the different browns you can make. And then once you find the one that you want to make a lot of it. For that sitting at least, you know, or like we did with the black, you can always get a small baby food container, some type of airtight container, and fill that in and save it there. Now, if you want to think about adding white, that's going to show you the color in a different way. So now you're like, that looks kind of gray. So that can also be a way to kind of inform you on how to add more color. Like, so what more color does that need to get it out of that gray? And something else you can do, you can also use a burnt umber if you want to. After you make this, I want everyone to experiment with making it from scratch. And you can also play around with what happens if you add a little burnt umber. There's also a raw sienna. I'm not sure if you guys have raw sienna, and a yellow ochre. Those three colors sometimes are really fun ways to kind of start the skin tone conversation. What happens if I add a different red or magenta? Also, something you can do. You can also use a store-bought orange. So that orange and that red look similar, but on the camera, but I swear they're actually a little different. So I'm going to try some orange. I'm going to take some of the brown that I already made. That orange really does like even it out a little bit. So now you kind of have this nice brown that you can start with. And I'm only lightening it to show you the different types of browns. If you want to make it darker, you could add a little blue, a little bit more of the magenta. And now you're just going to start playing with proportions. This is just going to get into like, and don't worry if you get frustrated, like, oh my God, how did I make that? And then I ruined it. You can always make another one. But there's just like so many different browns and skin colors that you can make. And you want to think about, you know, think about your own, but you also just want to experiment. Since you've never done this, you also just want to experiment. I really think this is a good one here, this dark one. So please don't be reliant on white. You see, I didn't use white until the end, and that was really just to show you how dark and how brown it was. You can really do this whole activity without much white. That's a great brown. Okay, so next thing I want you to do few drawings, paint sketches, paint studies, more appropriate paint studies. Using the different browns that you made, looking in a mirror. I actually have a mirror. Where is my mirror? I just had a mirror. Anyway, I want you to look in the mirror and I want you to practice making some portraits. Don't worry if they look like you. Go ahead and with the brown. You can just kind of draw with your paintbrush. There's a lot of water. I'm not worried about the color that I'm drawing in. looking at my hairline. I'm actually going to look into the camera and I can. Don't worry if this is you. I just want you to look at a human face. This is just the beginning. Just suggesting that there's a person there. Thinking about shadows. So you always have shadows under your eyes. Generally, you know, different degrees depending on how old you are. You always usually have shadows here under your nose and under your bottom lip. Because, you know, anywhere. If it gets too wet, just dry your brush off. You can do this in a sketchbook. You can do this on your canvas pad if you have paper left. Just do a few. You can just do it on regular paper. Don't worry if it gets all wrinkled or anything. These are just experiments. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to do a second video where I focus mostly just on the looking. I just have to find my mirror. But look at all the different browns I made before, and I didn't even use these ones over here. So, oops. Just considering that one, just a few minutes that I spent color mixing. I have all these different browns. I didn't even really use them all. And that just kind of going quickly, that took me only a few moments. And think about, you know, how you can change your browns. There's a terrible glare on this, so maybe that's better. Quick, do like 4 of these little quick paint studies after you mix a few different browns, and that will be due on the 17th. Okay, great.